I'm sitting in my car outside the police station right now, and my head's still spinning. I swear I can still hear the officer's voice, like a faint buzzing in my ears. "Take care of yourself, man." He said it with this look, this pitying look that told me he knew exactly what I was going through. Guess he's seen it all before. Hell, I'd probably look at someone the same way if they'd just gone through what I did. But let me back up. My name's John, and until a few hours ago, I thought I had a decent handle on my life. I mean, marriage has its ups and downs, but I figured Emma and I were doing all right. We've been together almost 10 years now. You spend a decade with someone, you'd think you'd know them, trust them. And maybe that's what's eating at me the most right now. This feeling that I didn't know her at all. It wasn't always like this. When we got together, Emma was bright and fiery, kept me on my toes. I loved that about her, the way she could make me laugh one minute and get me heated up the next. But recently, things changed. It started small. She'd go out more, dress up for little things, always had her phone in hand. I didn't question it at first. Everyone's allowed a little space, right? But she became distant, closed off in a way that made me feel like a stranger in my own home. And it didn't help that our sex life had become practically non-existent. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was stressed or going through something I didn't know about. I kept thinking, she'll come around. But deep down, I knew something was off. Tonight, though, everything came crashing down. I didn't just find out, I saw it. And here I am, outside the station, feeling like the ground's been ripped out from under me. I can't even remember when it all really started. Looking back now, there were signs, but I missed them, probably because I didn't want to see them. I mean, Emma and I weren't perfect, but who is? We'd had rough patches before and always came out stronger. So when she started acting a little more distant, I shrugged it off. Told myself she was just stressed, maybe a bit restless. But then, the changes became harder to ignore. Emma, the same woman who'd spent years in sweatpants and t-shirts around the house, was suddenly putting on makeup to run errands. And it wasn't just a little mascara or lip gloss. I'm talking full face, hair done, perfume. The kind of effort she used to make only for date nights. When I'd ask where she was going, she'd get defensive, saying stuff like, "What, can't I just want to look nice?" And sure, yeah, she could. But it didn't add up. Not when it was happening so often. Then there was her phone. Before, she'd leave it lying around wherever. Never cared if I picked it up or asked her to check a message. Now, she had that thing glued to her hand. She'd turn the screen away whenever I was nearby, and if she ever did leave it somewhere, she'd rush back to grab it like it was some precious artifact. I asked her about it once, tried to laugh it off, saying, "What's on there? National secrets?" She didn't laugh, just gave me this icy stare and walked out of the room. And don't even get me started on the nights out. Suddenly, she had all these girls' nights, like every other weekend. But I never saw her texting any friends to set them up, never heard her mention plans until she was out the door. When I'd ask, she'd snap, "John, you're being ridiculous. Don't you trust me?" I'd always end up backing down, telling myself it was just in my head. But tonight would prove that all those little suspicions, those gut feelings I tried to ignore, they weren't just in my head. So here's where it all came crashing down. Tonight, I finally decided I couldn't sit on my hands anymore. Emma had left for yet another girls' night, all dolled up, a little too polished for a supposed low-key evening. Something in me snapped. I was done with the excuses, the weird stares, the constant feeling that I was being played for a fool. I decided to do something I'd never done in all our years together. I followed her. Yeah, it sounds crazy, but I felt like I had no other choice. I just needed to know. If I was wrong, I'd feel like a paranoid idiot, but at least I'd get some peace of mind. So I waited a bit after she left, grabbed my jacket, and drove down the main road. I didn't know where she was going, but I figured if I circled around some of her usual spots, I'd eventually spot her car. It only took about 15 minutes before I saw it, parked outside this dimly lit bar on the other side of town. Someplace we'd never gone together. My heart was pounding, hands slick on the wheel as I pulled up a little way down the street and watched, barely breathing. It felt like forever, but eventually, I saw her come out. She wasn't alone. Some guy, tall and way too close to her, had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her out like he owned her. I'll never forget that moment. She was laughing, leaning into him like she hadn't a care in the world. For a second, I actually thought I might be sick, but somehow, I forced myself to stay put, watching in shock as they crossed the street together and disappeared into a nearby hotel. I didn't need to see anything else. The truth was right in front of me, in flashing neon lights, as clear as day. I can't explain how it felt, watching my wife walk into that hotel with another man. It was like my chest was caving in, every beat of my heart getting slower and heavier. I wanted to storm in there, drag her out by the arm, make a scene, but I couldn't move. I sat there, numb, replaying all those trust me lines in my head. I don't even know how long I sat there in my car, staring at that hotel entrance, my mind spinning in circles. Part of me hoped she'd come out right away, that maybe I just misunderstood somehow, and they'd gone into, I don't know, grab a drink? But I knew better. The minutes dragged on, and with each one that passed, the pit in my stomach grew heavier. She was in there with him, and I knew exactly what that meant. But instead of barging in like I wanted to, I decided to wait. I just wanted to see her face when she walked out, to see if she'd look even the slightest bit guilty. I wanted to catch that exact moment when she thought she'd gotten away with it, thinking I was none the wiser. And yeah, maybe I wanted to see the guy's face, too, the man who had the nerve to touch my wife. Hours passed, and every car that drove by felt like a jolt to my system. I was wired, my nerves buzzing. I kept imagining different scenarios, each one worse than the last. What was she doing in there? How could she do this to me after everything we'd been through? My mind ran back through all our memories, our promises. 10 years together, and here I was, sitting in a dark car, reduced to spying on the woman I'd given my life to. Finally, close to midnight, the hotel doors slid open. There they were, strolling out like they'd had the best night of their lives. I felt something in me snap. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. They walked to his car, parked just a few spots down, still laughing, completely oblivious to the fact that I was right there, watching. I could hear her voice, clear as day, the way she used to talk to me, all soft and giggly. As they reached his car, she leaned in, gave him a kiss. And that was it. I couldn't stay hidden any longer. I opened my car door and stepped out, the sound echoing in the silence of the lot. Her head whipped around, her eyes meeting mine, and the look on her face. She knew. She knew she was caught. There was this moment, maybe just a second or two, where everything went completely still. She stared at me, her eyes wide, and I could see her mind racing, trying to piece together an excuse or maybe just scrambling for something to say. The guy looked between us, clearly confused, like he had no idea what was going on. I almost felt sorry for him, standing there clueless, but that pity didn't last long. I walked toward them, slow and steady, feeling this cold calm wash over me. I didn't even know what I was going to say. Every word felt too small for what I'd just seen. Emma was the first to break the silence. She took a step forward, hands raised, trying to play it off. "John, this isn't what it looks like," she stammered, her voice shaky but still forcing that sweet tone she used whenever she wanted to get out of trouble. But I wasn't having it this time. "Not what it looks like," I said, my voice low, barely recognizing it as my own. "So walking into a hotel with him, kissing him, all of that, it's just a big misunderstanding?" My words came out sharp, each one a cut. She flinched, but the guy beside her just shrugged, looking at me with a blank expression. "Hey man, I didn't know she was married." "She never told me," he muttered, shoving his hands in his pockets like he was already getting bored of the whole scene. That hit me like a punch to the gut. She hadn't even told him. She'd been living this double life, hiding our entire marriage like it was something she could erase whenever she felt like it. Emma started to say something else, her words spilling over each other, fast and desperate. "John, listen to me. I was going to tell you. It just happened. Things have been hard between us, and I didn't know how to fix it." Her face twisted into this mock sincerity, but I wasn't falling for it. Every word out of her mouth was just more lies piling on top of each other. "So this is how you fix things?" I asked, voice colder than I'd ever heard it. By sneaking around behind my back? By turning me into the biggest fool on earth? I could feel the anger boiling, but behind that was this crushing sadness, this betrayal that was too big to even put into words. She tried to reach for me, but I took a step back, the distance between us growing in more ways than one. "You don't get to touch me," I said, the weight of it landing hard. For a split second, I thought I saw real regret in her eyes, like she finally understood what she'd done. But it was too late for that. Way too late. And just like that, I turned around, leaving her and her lover standing there in the cold night, stunned and silent. I don't even remember the drive home. My hands were on the wheel, but my mind was a mess, going 100 different directions, all leading to the same dead end. I'd caught her. I'd actually seen her, in real time, sneaking around with another man. And now what? The house was dark when I got back, the same way I'd left it. But everything felt different, like it wasn't my home anymore. I stepped inside, closed the door softly behind me, and just stood there in the silence, the weight of what I'd seen finally settling in. My whole life felt like a lie. The woman I'd built everything with, who I'd thought I knew better than anyone. It turned out I didn't know her at all. I ended up in our living room, sitting on the couch, staring at a family photo on the wall. It was from a trip we'd taken years ago, when things were good, at least I'd thought they were. I remembered the way she used to laugh, the way she'd look at me like I was the only person in the world. Had that all been fake? Had she always been this way, and I'd just been too blind to see it? My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I knew without looking it was her. She'd probably realized I wasn't coming back to the hotel parking lot to hash things out, and now she wanted to talk. Apologize, maybe, or spin some story to make me think it wasn't as bad as it looked. But I couldn't bring myself to answer. Not yet. I needed to get my head straight first, figure out what I wanted, because I knew the moment I heard her voice, she'd try to twist things around. The messages started coming in, one after another, each one making my phone light up in the darkness of the living room. Apologies, excuses, please. I could practically hear her frantic tone through the words on the screen. She was sorry. She didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. She'd been feeling lonely. It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything. Every excuse she could throw at me to justify what I'd just seen with my own eyes. I set the phone down, refusing to read another word. I was exhausted, mentally and physically. But there was no way I was sleeping tonight. Not with the image of her and that guy burned into my mind, replaying over and over. I couldn't shut it off, couldn't shake the betrayal. Eventually, I made my way to the bedroom, half expecting her to walk in behind me, but it was empty, cold. She hadn't come home yet, and a part of me wondered if she even would. I must have drifted off at some point, but when I woke up, it was already light out. I felt that thick, empty feeling that hits you after a nightmare. Only this one was real. I got up, feeling hollow and slow, like I was moving through fog. My phone was still buzzing with notifications from her, a dozen missed calls, and too many messages to count. But she hadn't come home. I dragged myself to the kitchen and made coffee, trying to piece together my next move. I couldn't ignore this forever, but I wasn't about to let her waltz back in here and sweet-talk her way out of it either. Every time I thought about her face when she'd seen me, the shock, the panic, it made my blood boil all over again. How could she even think I'd buy her excuses after what I'd seen? Just as I was staring into my mug, trying to ground myself, I heard her car pull up outside. I froze, heart pounding, not sure if I was ready to face her. But then the door opened, and there she was, looking rough, hair messy, makeup smudged, clothes wrinkled. For a second, she looked almost ashamed, standing there in our doorway like a stranger. "John," she started, her voice soft, but I held up a hand to stop her. I wasn't ready for some half-hearted apology. I wanted the truth, no matter how ugly it was. "You spent the night with him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though the words felt like they were screaming through the silence. She looked down, her hands fiddling with her purse strap, but she didn't deny it. That silent confirmation was like another punch to the gut. "John, it's not like that," she stammered, eyes wide as she struggled to find words. I was confused. I made a mistake. But it was nothing. He means nothing to me. Nothing, I repeated, my voice edged with disbelief. You're calling it nothing after sneaking around behind my back? You threw away our entire marriage for nothing? I could see the desperation on her face, the frantic need to make this go away, to somehow rewrite what I'd seen. But the more she talked, the more tangled her lies became. Every excuse she threw at me just added fuel to the fire. She went on about feeling neglected and unappreciated, blaming me for working too much, for not paying her enough attention, as if that somehow made it okay. But I wasn't buying it. Not this time. You think you can just blame me? I asked, my voice colder than ice. Maybe I worked a lot because I trusted you, because I thought you were my partner, that we were in this together. But I guess I was wrong. Her face fell, and for the first time, I saw real panic in her eyes. She was starting to realize just how much she'd shattered, how deep the damage went. But at that point, I didn't care. The betrayal had already rooted itself too deep, and there was no patching it up with apologies. She reached for my hand, her voice breaking. Please, John, just give me a chance to make it right. But I pulled back, stepping away, my mind made up. You've already made your choice, I said, my voice steady, even as my heart pounded. Now it's time for me to make mine. And with that, I left her standing there, alone in our kitchen, her tear-streaked face blurring in my memory as I walked away. I spent the next few days going through the motions, trying to stay numb. It was like being trapped in a storm that just wouldn't let up. I avoided going home as much as possible, crashing at a friend's place or just driving around aimlessly, letting the silence keep me company. I hadn't blocked Emma's number, but I also hadn't responded to a single call or message. I needed space to think, to decide what life looked like now, without her. Then, on the third morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another attempt from her. But something told me to answer, and when I did, I heard her mother's voice, soft and hesitant. John? It's Mary Ann, Emma's mom. Do you have a minute? I felt a pang of something close to guilt. Her family had always been good to me, and hearing her mom's voice brought a rush of memories I wasn't prepared for. I cleared my throat and forced myself to stay steady. Hey, Mary Ann, what's going on? There was a pause, and I could sense the worry in her voice. John, honey, I'm sorry to intrude, but I'm really worried about Emma. She's not doing well. She came over last night, completely a wreck. She wouldn't say much, but, well, we can tell something's happened. I'm just wondering if you'd be willing to talk to her, help her get through this? The request caught me off guard. Here I was, still reeling from what she'd done, and her mom was asking me to help her? The last thing I wanted was to fix anything for Emma. But Mary Ann's words lingered, each one loaded with that gentle worry only a mother could have. I took a deep breath, feeling the conflict boiling up. Mary Ann, I don't know if I can do that. Things between Emma and me, they're not. I stopped, not wanting to drag her mom into the mess. But she pressed on. John, I'm not asking you to make things right. Just, maybe give her a chance to explain. She's been staying with us, and she's not herself. I've never seen her like this. I struggled with the idea of seeing Emma again, of letting her try to justify her actions after everything I'd seen. But I could hear the heartbreak in her mom's voice, the way it cracked as she pleaded with me, and I realized that Emma's actions hadn't just destroyed my life. They'd hurt her family too. After a long pause, I finally caved. All right, Mary Ann, I'll talk to her. Just once. But I can't promise anything. She thanked me, her voice shaky with relief, and we ended the call. I sat there for a moment, feeling that pit in my stomach grow deeper. The last thing I wanted was to give Emma more chances to twist things, to try and rewrite the betrayal that was still fresh in my mind. But maybe I needed to face her, one last time, to close this chapter for good. Later that evening, I got a message from her mom saying Emma would be at a cafe we used to go to, waiting for me. I don't know what I was expecting when I walked into that cafe, but it sure as hell wasn't what I found. The place was nearly empty, just a few regulars sitting at tables, lost in their own worlds. The smell of fresh coffee and the soft hum of low conversation filled the air, but all of it felt so far away. My head was pounding, Each step I took closer to that corner booth where Emma sat made my pulse race. I hadn't seen her in days, but the anger, the hurt, the sense of betrayal, they were all still there, lodged in my chest like a heavy stone. When I saw her, my first thought was, she looks different. Not physically, but the energy around her had shifted. The woman I'd married, the woman I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by someone who seemed smaller, more fragile. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't been sleeping, and her face was pale, drained of the fire that had once burned behind her smile. She stood when she saw me, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed a strand of hair behind her ear. I stopped a few feet away, my arms crossed tightly over my chest, unsure of how to feel, unsure of what I was even supposed to say. "John," her voice cracked, and she quickly wiped her eyes. "I didn't think you'd actually show up." I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. Every part of me was screaming at her to leave, to just walk away and let me hold on to whatever dignity I had left. But there was something in her face, a desperation, a brokenness, that made me hesitate. I motioned for her to sit back down, though I stayed standing. The whole room felt too small, too suffocating. She sat, her hands twisting together in her lap as she avoided looking at me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, and it felt like the silence was crushing me. Then, finally, she exhaled shakily and met my gaze. "I don't know where to start," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry, John. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen." I wanted to yell at her, to demand an answer that made sense, but I held myself back. "So, what? You didn't mean for me to find out? Is that it?" My voice was sharp, the bitterness seeping through every word. Her eyes welled up, and I could see she was struggling to hold herself together. "No, I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to ruin everything we had. But it just happened, and I was scared. I don't know why I did it, I can't explain it. I just got so lost. And when I met Sam, he was there for me in a way you weren't, and it spiraled. I should have come to you. I should have been honest from the start, but I wasn't. I'm so sorry." The name Sam hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course, the guy from the other night, the one who'd taken my place in the worst possible way. I'd known about him, but hearing her say his name out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. "You're sorry?" I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. "You cheated on me, Emma. You lied to my face for who knows how long. And now you're sitting here, telling me you're sorry?" I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "You think I'm just going to forgive you? Like it's that easy?" Her face crumpled as she tried to hold back the tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that it wasn't about you. It was never about not loving you. I don't know what happened to me. I'm lost, John. And I'm so sorry." I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her that she didn't get to play the victim here, that she didn't get to break me, and then act like everything would be okay if she cried hard enough. But as I looked at her, something inside me shifted, just a little. There was no satisfaction in seeing her break down, no relief in knowing that the power had shifted to me. If anything, it felt emptier. "So, what now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my mind was spinning. "What do you want from me, Emma?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't know, John. I don't know what I want anymore. I'm sorry, and I'll accept whatever you decide, but I had to try. I had to at least tell you the truth." For a second, the room felt impossibly heavy, and I realized that this wasn't just about the two of us anymore. The damage had been done, and no words could fix it, not hers, not mine. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel, but one thing was crystal clear. Whatever future I had in my mind for us, it was gone. We sat there in that silence for what felt like an eternity, Emma still looking at me with those broken, regret-filled eyes, waiting for me to say something, anything, to make sense of what was happening. But the truth was, I didn't know what I was supposed to say. There was no magic word that could fix this, no reason to give her another chance, and no grand gesture that could erase the past few months. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm, but the weight of everything I'd been holding inside was there. I think you should go, Emma. I can't do this anymore. Her face crumpled again, the words hitting her like a slap. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say either. There was nothing left to say. She stood slowly, tears streaming down her face, and for a moment, I thought she might leave quietly, no more drama. But then she stopped. Right at the door, she turned back and whispered, I never wanted this, John. Never. I didn't respond. What else was there to say? We both knew it was over. She left. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, I felt a strange sense of relief. The tension, the anger, the weight of everything that had happened seemed to lift off my shoulders. It was like the moment I let her go, I also let go of everything I'd been carrying with me. I was free. I stood there for a few minutes, just breathing, taking it all in, not sure where to go from here. The whole situation was a mess, but I'd lived through it, and now I was going to have to find my way out. But then, just as I was about to turn and leave the cafe, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I spun around, half expecting to see Emma standing there again. Maybe with more apologies, maybe with some excuse. But no, it wasn't her. It was Sam, the guy I'd seen that night, the one who'd taken my place, the one who'd been lying with my wife. He looked different, not like the confident, cocky guy I'd seen in the bar that night. He was nervous, almost shaking. He cleared his throat as if he didn't know exactly how to approach me. John, I don't know what you want from me, but I couldn't just let it end like this. I didn't let him finish. Are you kidding me? I snapped, too shocked to even control my voice. You come after this? After everything that's happened? Sam's face twisted in confusion, and then, surprisingly, in guilt. I didn't know, man. I didn't know what was going on with you, too. She said you guys were having problems, that you were barely even together. She told me she was done with you, that you were neglecting her. I could feel the anger bubbling up again, but I stopped myself. I didn't need to waste my time on him. I already knew this story, but something about the way he was standing there, so unsure, so off balance, made me pause. And then I realized what was really going on, what the truth actually was. Sam wasn't the one I should be angry at. Wait, I said, cutting him off mid-sentence. Hold up. You really didn't know? She never told you? His eyes widened, and he shook his head. No, man. I thought she was telling me the truth. But after everything that's happened, I started thinking, maybe I got played too. I stood there, trying to process what he was saying. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a quiet disbelief. Emma hadn't just cheated on me. She'd been playing him too. She had painted a picture, manipulated him the same way she'd manipulated me, using lies and half-truths. She had been playing both of us. And here we were, both of us, broken in our own ways, with nowhere else to go but toward each other. Sam and I stood there for a long while, the silence between us growing less uncomfortable by the second. We both had been deceived, both had been pawns in her game. Then, without warning, he extended a hand to me. Look, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know what she was up to. For a moment, I just stared at his hand. But then, something in me clicked. I wasn't going to get closure from Emma. I wasn't going to get it from Sam, either. But this odd, unexpected moment where we both realized we'd been duped, felt real. And maybe, just maybe, it was what we both needed to finally move on. I shook his hand, not as a sign of forgiveness, but as a sign of closure. As a sign that, for the first time in months, we were both free from her lies. We walked out of that cafe together, not as friends, but as two guys who had both been burned and were now learning how to walk away. And I realized, as I stood there in the cool night air, that I had learned something from all of this, something I never would have expected. The truth wasn't just about catching someone in the act. It was about seeing the bigger picture, about understanding that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are just as lost as we are. And in the end, maybe the most unexpected thing was that, through all this pain and betrayal, I was going to be okay. I had to be, because if I didn't find peace in the chaos, I'd end up just as broken as the people who hurt me.